Now, I was the staff anaesthetist and perioperative physician at a regional Victorian hospital when I was fired because I asked for a risk assessment when the COVID-19 vaccine mandates came into place. Now, I took that stance more for medical ethics, because even with a superficial understanding of the history of why we have informed consent in the first place, I thought it was a very slippery slope for doctors to endorse coercion, especially for the entire population, for a medical therapy, let alone an experimental one. Now, I'm sad that this stance was not taken by even 1% of doctors in Australia. Today's topic is tyranny for your own good. Now, it behooves us to remember that tyrannical rule is often carried out by a group of very influential people who do things to suit them. They're usually above the recourse of normal lawful processes. As an anaesthetist, I turned up for work in the early days of the pandemic, even when there wasn't enough PPE for frontline staff. I was deemed competent to be able to care for patients even the day before the mandate deadline, but suddenly after that, I couldn't fulfill an inherent requirement of my role. Now, I was at far higher risk of contracting COVID than anyone involved in the decision to fire me sitting in HR departments in hospitals and in Spring Street. We become familiar with the fact that now tyranny is not found at the end of a pointy end of a bayonet, but at the end of a syringe. I want to tell you two stories that very few people in the world can tell, and I want you to really reflect on how health can be used to control a population. After my firing, I joined AMPS, and also the volunteer effort from around the world, coordinated by the dailycloud.io, that has looked into the data of the one trial that the FDA and regulators from around the world looked at to approve the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine in December 2020. I can tell this story because I'm part of the team that has investigated the primary source data and have published the first peer-reviewed article in the medical literature looking into this data by a group not affiliated with study sponsors. The data that the FDA relied upon to approve the Pfizer vaccine was conducted on more than 44,000 clinical trial participants at 153 sites in 6 countries. It was to be locked away from public scrutiny for 75 years. This 2-year trial has only had its 16-week and 6-month findings published thus far. On the 8th of November 2020, the day after Joe Biden was declared President of the United States, Pfizer announced that they had 94 suitable cases from their trial, and at that point, the vaccine efficacy was 90%. The world heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed the solution to the endless lockdowns was in sight. The world, however, did not know that the contract between Pfizer and the Trump administration was for an approved vaccine by the 31st of October 2020, and contract modifications could only be done in good faith. Now, the 95% efficacy claim of the Pfizer vaccine, even though the study was done on 44,000 patients, only came from the results of 170 patients. This was the evaluable population, the primary endpoint of the trial. There was always a schedule laid out by Pfizer as to when these patients could be analyzed, when they were accumulated. If you think about it, to fulfill the contract for an approved vaccine by the 31st of October 2020, Pfizer would have had to send to the FDA as soon as possible when they reached the first threshold at 32 cases. Now, in a press statement, Pfizer said that they had removed the 32 case threshold and for operational reasons, I wonder what the operation was, and they would only do it when they accrued 62 cases. Now, this was when they announced the vaccine on November 9th. In the Pfizer protocol, on October 29th, 2020, they said that they would do the interim analysis when they reached at least 62 cases. So you think October 31st, there wasn't any vaccine announcement. They didn't reach the number of cases they were supposed to reach. Now, because Dan Andrews has given me a bit more time, I was able, with my colleagues from around the world, to find the actual 170 patients of which the 95% efficacy claim came from. But this part is just a demonstration of the accrual of the cases based on the publicly available data. And if we hadn't had access to the data, you wouldn't know the next graph I'm going to show you. So this is just the simulated. November 8th, they said they reached 94 cases. They reached 170 cases on November 14th. That's the data cutoff. There was no vaccine announcement. And they obviously missed the date for contract delivery. The contract at that point was $2 billion. And when you actually find the actual 170 patients, what you can see is the difference between what you were led to believe, which is the red line, and what really happened. And the first thing that you see is that's a difference. If this is warp speed and we have to have a vaccine as soon as possible, when did they actually accrue 94 cases? They accrued it before, the day before the contract was over. But more importantly, when did they accrue 62 cases? They accrued that on October 22nd. So even the day that they announced that they would only do an interim analysis on October 29, when they reached 62 cases, they were already sitting on more than 62 cases. All this is available on this report. It's report number 76 on Daily Cloud IO. I actually named some of the officials who were involved in carrying out, perhaps this was Pfizer's contribution to election interference in November 2020. We will not know until there's more investigation, obviously. Now, I promised you two stories about how health is really used to control a population. For the next bit is basically in this same trial, at the point of December 2020, when they approved the vaccine, what was publicly presented to the world was there were only 6 deaths thus far, 4 placebo, 2 vaccinated. This is not clinically, statistically significant. The study wasn't powered for deaths, but a layperson would interpret it. If I took this vaccine, my chances of dying would seem to be halved by half. Now, this is the study that I was talking about, the first study in the peer-reviewed literature looking into the original Pfizer data. And what we did was we plotted out deaths as they occurred along the timeline of the trial and according to the arm of the trial that they were. And you will see up to the data cutoff date of November 14th, it was what was reported. It wasn't 6 deaths, it was 11. So now we have a situation where there are more people dying in this trial, and they're not actually reporting that accurately. How does this happen? What we found was that they actually delayed recording deaths. So when you have the deaths that happen in the placebo arm, it was actually 5 deaths. In the vaccinated arm, it was 6. So they've misrepresented what they publicly represented, where they said publicly there were more deaths in the placebo arm. It was untrue. It was more deaths in the vaccinated arm. The capture rate for reporting deaths in the placebo group was 80%, so they reported 4 out of the 5 deaths that happened. But for the vaccinated group, they somehow couldn't report deaths accurately, and they only managed to capture 2 out of the 6 that happened. And they weren't publicly disclosed. And for us not to cast aspersions on Pfizer, it would be that, it just so happened that the loved ones of the clinical trial participants didn't call Pfizer and tell them their loved ones died. But what we found, and I've written it in a letter to Ken Paxton, we have documentation that the patient's loved ones called the clinical trial site on the day that the patients died and informed Pfizer. And what happened was that some influential group of people who still have a job, unlike myself, did not disclose this publicly. So this is the level of tyranny, and don't forget it's for your own health. Now, one of the patients who died, it was October 19th. She was 63 years old. This is in the vaccinated arm. When the day before, she actually had an autopsy result that was known to Pfizer probably the day before the VRBAC meeting on December 10th, because the words sudden cardiac death appear in the clinical notes. But according to Pfizer, this death in the 63-year-old woman with a bit of depression and back pain was not due to the study trial drug, but because of her risk factors of obesity and hypertension. Guess what her weight was? Was 74 kilos. So now all those 74 kilos people are at risk of dying from sudden cardiac death. Now, obviously, this is pretty explosive stuff, and it's not really known because we're very, very shadow banned, and I'm pretty sure I'll never be sponsored by Pfizer. Do I fear for my life telling you this story? Truth be told, I'd figured out about Pfizer's contribution to election interference months before I actually wrote the report. And I only gathered enough courage to write it after I went for a pilgrimage. But I want to tell the story anyway, because the best defense for free people is free speech, debate, and so we get to the truth. And I really want to tell this story. I really want to tell this story more for the doctors who have pushed this vaccine without really understanding the data to fully understand what they have been part of. So much of history is ordinary, innocent people without a voice, like the hidden deaths who died in this trial and were hidden. They're often caught in circumstances where very powerful forces hold all the cards. So much of history shows the powerful often win, and the price paid by those who stand up to them is very high. I know, my firing is testimony to that. But I want to tell these stories anyway, because I'm holding out that in spite of the bleakness of the moment, this time, things will end differently. Thank you.